Welcome to the Pastor and Postmaster podcast. What you wanted to hear in the sermon, but you didn't.
Where the Academy meets every day.
And where we always take every opportunity to promote our own work and somehow profit off it. Right, Bo?
Absolutely.
So
20%.
we talked 20% friend discount. Please give your information in the comments. Bo, though, we do want to show some artwork. We talked about that for our faithful, I think, 74 subscribers so far. Let's try to get to 100 soon. But Bo, show us. And we're here with the protege as well, who's an artist.
For all you aspiring artists out there, this represents, Kyla texted me and said, bring some art, but I'd already left home. So I snagged this from the Rendells.
In our son's nursery.
Yes. And so by way of explanation, most people, when they're new to art, they are petrified when thinking about painting a portrait or something like that. I actually love to paint portraits and people in front of buildings, urban settings and stuff. I'm terrified approaching a landscape or a abstract. So this was me on maybe my third sort of a landscape. It's the town of Durham, California, from Table Mountain down by Oroville. And for those of you who are learning to do art, or you're a seasoned artist, you'll notice that I followed the rule of thirds. I centered the focal point, which is real safe. So this is a very traditional sort of piece.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And what about those who would like to possibly purchase or bum off some of your works?
Go to Bo Salisbury 2018 on Instagram. And you'll find some works there that are for sale.
And
most of them are large. Most of the stuff I do is quite large.
And your Facebook profile has your pictures because we see them. I don't know if I'd use a friend.
Yes. Bo Salisbury on Facebook.
So anyway,
Bo Salisbury Fine Art.
That actually is a great transition to our subject today, which is nothingness. So we are going to talk about nihilism, and has no connection to the artwork. It maybe is anti-art.
Well,
in some ways.
I actually, true beauty, an aesthetic. I believe that things are beautiful intrinsically, and so that's what I pursue in my art. But there was a movement called the Dada movement that came out of nihilism. It was a strictly philosophical approach to art. It didn't last a long time because, as Frank Zappa says, if you can't monetize it, it's never going to be commercially, it's
what years were Dada again?
Really
60s?
It's the early part of the last century.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was an assault on beauty, that life is not beautiful and there's no rules. And it led to the ready-made school of art. So is it Duchamp or who was it that did an installation of a men's urinal? That's ready-made.
That wasn't Jackson Pollock, right?
No.
It might have been Duchamp, Marcel Duchamp.
Yeah, I think it's Duchamp. So anyway, it's steeped in nihilism.
Interestingly enough, though, the protege here, there's actually a proof for God found in beauty. It's a classic proof.
Absolutely.
So we're speaking of nothingness, which nihilism. So I was just. It's kind of interesting how the nihilists kind of remove art because it is one of the proofs, traditional proofs for God's existence.
And it's a protest. It's gratuitous, meaning like, hey, did that help you survive? It certainly didn't help you pay the bills for most of your life, as most artists would recognize. It's done because beauty is worthwhile.
Yes.
Recognizable.
Yes.
So
it was an open assault on traditional art.
And it's good for us at this point where we mention nihilism. Let's define it here by a definition you get in the internet. It's actually the Oxford Dictionary Theology Dictionary. It is defined specifically as the rejection of all religious and moral principles in the belief that life is meaningless. Ooh, that is quite dark. I would just say this is something that we see more than we hear explained or defined. So you can probably sense nihilism, but let me give you an example of where the FBI literally attributed something to what they call nihilistic ideation. So in a manifesto on May 17, 2025, so just a few months ago, Guy Edward Bartkus. Can you still find that online or only on certain social media places?
Q.
Yeah, maybe. It was on X for that brief window of time. I don't know. Oftentimes these stories are buried. Anyway, this guy, Bart Kiss, explained his rationale for bombing an IVF clinic. Was it down in Palm Springs, I think? And he proceeded the next day to do that, killing himself and injuring 4 employees. And he said this in the manifesto. This is the part that I think is supremely nihilistic. He said, okay, so I figured I would just make a recording explaining why I've decided to bomb an IVF building or clinic. Basically, it just comes down that I'm angry that I exist and that nobody got my consent to bring me here. So in an online account, he identified himself as a, quote, pro-mortalist and someone who denounced being forced to, quote, take the drug of life. Any thoughts on that? Credo, I believe.
Yeah, we think of the Christian confessions or statements of faith, that sort of thing. That's a confession. That's a creed.
Yep. That's what I believe.
Well, we've seen this repeated. There was another shooter a couple years ago who, through investigative journalism, they finally got the credo released, but it took years. So how do you think that the FBI, society at large, do you think they're trying to protect people from the understanding of nihilism? Or do you think they're trying to hide the fact that it has kind of permeated through our culture?
Gosh, that is a great question.
Stumped.
I mean, and honestly, what's great about this is we don't always script this. Yeah, you're right. It's almost, it's so fearful because if it's something related to, like, say, the school shooting stereotype. School shootings are like the supreme nihilistic act because they're going after people who are not. It's not like a gang where you have someone who presumably owes debts or there's rivals. It's not even like terrorism where it's religiously. Mm-hmm. It seems to be aimless, and so it cannot be predicted or controlled.
Well, these people are also young, though. A lot of the shooters, you're not finding 50-year-old men gearing up.
I'm fed up with life.
Right? The pension didn't come through, so they're going to take it out on a school. So you're seeing this kind of in the younger generation. These are people who still should have some semblance of innocence.
So, and they're not reading Nietzsche. They're not reading the gay science or.
Well, Nietzsche himself was just an adolescent who was pissed at the world.
But you know what I'm saying.
Life affirming.
Do you think they're coming at it from a well-reasoned academic sort of point of view, or do you think they're imbibing the culture, and it's just forming a reality in their heads?
Well, I think there's two types of nihilism, and there's multiple types of nihilism,
right.
But two that are really prevalent right now. And we see the individual nihilism, and then we also see the cultural nihilism, mm-hmm. like as you see in Europe and other Western nations, where there's this guilt and there's no point for even their country existing.
No atonement, no redemption.
Yeah, exactly. And so they're welcoming in their own destruction. But in terms of the individual, these people they're converted to this religion of nothingness. And, largely online. But, I'm interested to see kind of how we respond to that as your protege. How would you encourage me to talk to a young person who is going through this feeling of nothingness?
Gosh, that's such a good observation. I think people that are our listeners might be like, well, Bart Kiss and those shooters, they're extreme. The guy that burned himself alive for Palestine back about a year ago in front of the White House, they're extreme. That's not what I don't abide by that. And I think both Brody and I know that both familiar with Helmut Thielicke wrote a book on nihilism. Thank you, Carl Truman. I know you're not a faithful subscriber, probably not, but nevertheless, first things he mentioned Thielicke's book, not in print. You got to get a used copy, which means they're better made in the 1960s, but
more evidence of the institutions trying to suppress the.
Yeah, why is this book not in print? This book is incredible. Yes. It was a series of lectures that Thielicke, who taught the University of Tübingen in Germany, it's like a contemporary Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Karl Barth, so born early 1900s, died in I think 1986. And Robert Novak, who wrote the preface to the book, says, he gets this picture. It's 1945. The war is over. You got all these like soldiers, students. They're in the rain, drenched, tearing off the insignia for their German uniforms. And he gives this series of lectures on nihilism. And he'd experienced it his whole life. From World War I, the Weimar Republic, going up to World War II, and he explains all of what's going on, so he could see it in a vivid way that we're just beginning to see now.
Did he participate in any of those movements?
I admittedly have not read a biography on him, so I need to do that.
Institutions probably won't allow it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I don't know. I know critical biography has been translated in English. I don't know. I mean, a lot of America for a long time has been known as a place that's very optimistic. We knew
Right.
that from writing our book.
And in our last podcast, we talked about people coming to California because it's a new world, new start,
Yep.
endless opportunity.
It's not until the 1960s that like this European like darkness has kind of come into our country as we're still young. So we're just now beginning to see it since the late 1960s. A few things I would say, because most people again will be like, well, I'm not that extreme. Didn't survive Nazis and World War One, and I'm not thinking of blowing up an IVF clinic. But I would say a few things. There is a culture of death. Bo, you brought up Pope John Paul II, the late Pope John Paul II. Encyclical that came out in 1995. He was Pope until 2005. He talked about a culture of death, which we now use it pretty generally.
Yeah, he coined the term culture of death, which is very common. At the same time, he talked about a culture of life, which you don't hear in the popular media talked about.
Well, I think our generation, as we're entering in fifth, sixth generational warfare, I think we're going to be able to say, as our fathers survived World War I and World War II, where there were just mass casualties, we're going to say we survived this nihilistic period.
Wow,
where
good.
there is mass casualties, where we see, ideologies that are just so antithetical to life. I mean, the thing we're not supposed to talk about, abortions or the transhumanism
Right.
or just the
Except in this
incels.
podcast, which we do talk about.
But it's like you said, a culture of death. And I think, our generation, we're going to say, hey, I lived through this war where there definitely are people pushing this culture of death.
We see it in so many ways. I wouldn't say the culture of death. Where do you see it? I would say just a quick observation. I go to gym here in town, and it's interesting. I see a contrast. A lot of Christian shirts, Bible verses. I wear them too sometimes, and then death paraphernalia. It's like extreme, and it's like skulls, references to suicide, darkness, and it's like a microcosm of our culture, like a competing like rival between like the Christian life affirming and the death works, but nothing neutral. I noticed that. Halloween, the exaltation of Halloween, I don't want to get in that. You can look at our previous podcast, but the idea that particular holiday has such an interesting obsession. Funny story, personal story. We had an older bed, and our parents were like, they gave it to us like, hey, this bed's so rickety. It's jerry rigged with bolts and stuff.
Let's
give it away
give it
to
to the
someone.
kids.
Let's give it away to someone who's it's gonna find a nice home. So my dad found someone that did it in Roseville, and she's like, this is gonna be great for our Halloween front yard scene.
Bolts were that rusty, huh?
Yeah, that's right, that rusty. So that culture of death, I would say too, the discussion on assisted suicide broadly, especially UK, Canada.
Well, it's cheaper that way.
Well,
When all you are is economic.
And then, frankly, I hear people talking about this ghoulish sort of fascination people have with the war in Ukraine, where you're just grinding up generations of young people
And it's
with a smile on their face.
and it's video game war,
yes.
Yeah.
most of it.
Well, they had that, this was years ago, but they had that website where you could look at real tragedies around the world that people film. They put them up there uncensored. And oddly enough, I don't know that site still exists, but if you go to X or Twitter, because, but anyway.
Repent.
Because, yeah. But you see people just spending hours doom scrolling through people being murdered. It's
dark.
It's dark, and it's because it's on a phone. We think we're kind of it's immune.
We're buffered from it. Yeah. So I think so again, those are again extremes. I mean, you might be thinking this. Well, that's not what I'm going through. That's not what my kids are going through. But let me tell you a little more subtle, because Tilika gets at this, because I'm citing my source here. These are not just my original thoughts as I was in my Bible, and I said, Lord, please give me something about nihilism. No, I'm just kidding. This book, it was a huge inspiration for me, and so one thing that Tilika points out is that, the idea that you have a certain degree of anxiety about the future, a sense of cosmic oppression. And one of those things that, this is actually another German figure, Oswald Spengler has a book called Decline of the West. And he talks about children, because that's kind of a big question of like the falling birth rates below replacement levels across the world. You can look at that all over the internet. It's all over the place. And he said any culture in which people ask the question, should I have kids or not, is already in a death spiral.
Yeah.
The fact that it asks that question.
Well, a quote from Heidegger that was used in that book.
Who's that guy?
Well, he's a philosopher, but the quote that he has is it's really good. It says, "Fear," he says, "relates to something that exists within the world, whereas the object of anxiety is being in the world as such as it is." So you start to see this relationship where fear is a natural cause. If you're standing on a cliff and the wind's blowing really hard, you might be a little afraid of getting pushed over. But anxiety is just the fear of being, which is kind of close related to the fear of nothingness. Because if you're just this shell and there's nothing inside of you, there's no soul, then the fear of being in and of itself doesn't really have, it's a way of coping with not that fear. So what I'm trying to say is like, if we are nothing, then there is no fear of being nothing. And I think that is it's something that, especially our young people are really going through. No, go ahead.
Well, no. So it's kind of interesting because I was talking to somebody yesterday and this came up, and it just came to me now. I had a nihilistic trajectory that I didn't realize I did until just now. I've told people I've always lived with a sense of anxiety.
I didn't know that.
In my memory, as a small child even, and so I can remember distinctly. I know what time it was in my life because I can visualize what was going on in my bedroom when I was thinking about it. And there was a piece of furniture in there that was there for 2 years. So I was either 5 or 6 years old. So I'm laying in bed. My parents had sent me to a Christian school because I was a discipline problem. So I'm hearing stuff. And my parents are talking about current events, UFOs and no, I mean, like
You're ahead of your time, my friend.
I can remember my mom. I can remember saying to my mom, we lived under the flight path to LAX, so the planes are decelerating and they're making that whistling sound. I can remember asking my mom, "Are they bombing us?" But so I remember laying there one night, and I was looking at this piece of furniture, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to die someday, and nobody's going to know I ever existed.
Before you were a Christian, of course.
No, I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was not. I was an agnostic atheist at the age of 5 or 6.
Wow.
And I can remember thinking, well, how am I going to overcome this problem? And I thought, oh, I'm going to become a professional baseball player. Then everybody will remember who I am. And then after that, I always had this anxiety. When I was a freshman in high school, I can remember we were smoking pot and doing stuff, and I'd listen to Led Zeppelin at night. And I thought, Led Zeppelin 1, which is very dreary, and being totally depressed and thinking.
Were you dazed and confused?
Totally. That was what I was listening to. And I was just sitting there with this dread, and I wouldn't become a Christian for 4 years. So I thought of that as pre-evangelism. And what I did after that is I lived the most full life a teenager could live. My parents gave up on me. I had I didn't have to be home at a certain time. Drugs were freely there. I surfed. I did everything I wanted to. So I lived that hedonistic lifestyle. And at age 17, I just went, is this it?
Yeah.
I thought this is really unfulfilling and kind of a letdown. So sorry, I just had this.
It's interesting you bring up legacy because you talked about the bomber at the clinic. We just had another shooting at a church. We've had several over. I think there's been 9 done by transhumanists, and it's interesting because they have actually left a legacy. A lot of these people end up being known by most of the country.
Yeah, they want us to know what they were thinking.
And they tried to, the media will try to not identify their names, the shooter or
misgender them. You have to be like MSNBC and apologize.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's, I know. And it's interesting, thinking you, Bo, because a lot of people, I think would kick back against this because I don't think everyone has the same experience of despair that you do, that maybe,
No, that was my friends weren't like me.
Yeah,
In that
and not
sense,
everyone American shares this. I think generationally too. Like I can tell you, I think intellectually understand it, but I don't viscerally feel it. So, but you see more people that are affected by it. I think especially with Generation Z. I mean, the idea of anxiety, of being paralyzed, just of existing, despite how safe things are. You know, I brought up kids, not just because I have a lot of kids myself, but it does make you think like what things are worth risking when the risk is low. Everything from dating to looking for a job, the idea that you're paralyzed and you feel cosmically oppressed, that is a pervasive problem in our culture. And part of the reason why nihilism we featured it is it's not easily overcome. You can't just threaten someone out of it. You can't reason out of it. You can't say, look at the bright side. And T. like captures that really well. He can't say, hey, just look at the bright side. You know, and it's like, no, this is a spiritual, deep, deep darkness.
I would totally agree. And after becoming a Christian, that's kind of how I analyze looking back. And even now when I experience anxiety all the time, it's always there. I take inventory, and like you just said, I had no reason to be anxious.
Yeah, you know,
I never had any reason.
You weren't
Or like,
abused, nothing like that.
no, and like even money, like, you know, there was never any bill collectors at our door. There was never any, oh, we can't afford food or anything. And yet I was anxious about all those things. And I was a kid. Like, who was telling me that? Nobody.
Yep. It is. I think it does hint at, like, just like the negative, like, you know, like the ugliness and the reaction of Dada art against true beauty. The nihilism does point to a spiritual reality because you think, hey, materially, everything you have is provided for you. Your life is easy compared to all the people that we read in the past, whether because of death, of diseases. And so the spiritual reality, it's not enough for you just to have your physical needs met, to have safety, to have reliable food source, to have medicine. You have a spiritual need, and nihilism is filling the hole where there is no Christian faith.
So is nihilism, when you trace its origins, it's in the West, right?
Yeah.
Like it never arose in Africa or the Orient or
Arab country. So I have a quote here. That one of the earliest references is to a guy named Ivan Turgenev, a book I read called Fathers and Sons, 1862. So it's a little bit before that. A couple of German philosophers coined it, I think, in the 1850s. And there's a scene. I read this about a year ago. And there's a guy named Bazarov, and there's a guy named Arkady. I know I'm butchering these names because I did a lecture to a Ukrainian church. I was trying to say the Russian names, and they're laughing at me like, no, you don't have it right. So I'm sorry for you Slavic speakers if you're listening to this. Two of you. No. So someone asks, the guys go to college, they come back to the university in Russia in 1862, at least that's when the book's written. And they're talking to the dad, and then there's like a servant named Pavel, and I think it's the uncle to the son. And Bazarov is the nihilist. And so someone asks about Bazarov, why is he weird? Long story why that is. And he goes, he's a nihilist. What? Asked Nikolai Petrovich, while Pavel Petrovich raised his knife in the air with a piece of butter at the end of the blade remained motionless. He's a nihilist, repeated Arkady. A nihilist, said Nikolai Petrovich. Yes, that's from the Latin nihil, nothing, so far as I can judge. Therefore, the word connotes a man who doesn't recognize anything. Say, rather, who doesn't respect anything, added Pavel Petrovich, and once more busied himself with the butter. Who approaches everything from a critical point of view, remarked Arkady. Isn't that the same thing? No, it's not the same thing. A nihilist is a man who doesn't acknowledge any authorities, who doesn't accept a single principle on faith, no matter how much that principle may be surrounded by respect. And that's a good thing, is it? Interjected Pavel Petrovich. It depends on who you are. It's good for one man and bad for another.
So there's an extreme skepticism in it.
Yes. And guess what? And the reason why this book, Fathers and Sons, all of Dostoevsky's novels matter so much is what happens 50 years later in Russia. For you history buffs, 55 years later to be specific. It's called the Russian Revolution. Yeah. But between that time and when the Soviet Union crumbles, you know how many people die in the Soviet Union, they think?
Oh, it's millions.
It's like between, I mean, the fact that they don't even know, between 30 and 100 million people dead in that country from World War II, state enforced famines. And that's one of the darkest points I would hear, since this is our doomsday podcast here. One of the darkest points about this, and Tilika gets this part correct, is that most people who are nihilists don't remain skeptical of everything. Eventually, they fall for dictatorship.
Well, it's interesting because I'm reading through the Brothers Karamazov, and in book 1, chapter 5, as they're talking about the eternal soul, and they're side note, they're talking actually with a higher Orthodox priest, and he's very revered in this town.
Is this the elder?
This is the elder.
Elder Zosima.
Yes, and I love the fact that they
kinda
call
make fun of
him
him.
the first of the last.
Right.
It's this false humility that's found in Dostoevsky has a real subtle sense of humor and just kind of poking fun at it. But anyways, this quote, as soon and they're talking about there's a lot going on with France and the socialism and the capitalism, and anyway, so there's this quote: as soon as he reflected seriously, he was convinced on the existence of God and immortality, and at once he instinctively said to himself, I want to live for immortality, and I will accept no compromise. In the same way, he had decided that God and immortality did not exist. He would have once become an atheist and a socialist. For socialism is not merely the labor question, it is before all things the atheistic question. The question of the form taken by atheism today. The question of the Tower of Babel built without God, not to mount to heaven from earth, but to set heaven on earth.
Well, I'm going to here just give a few more quotes from Tilika's book, just because I think they're so helpful to kind of for you to reflect on. And then we're going to give you thoughts that connect with that to contemporary things. We mentioned the idea of fear. Brody mentioned as well, Heidegger and the idea of anxiety, how it's not just fear of something object, but just fear or just idea like there's angst at just existing. And one thing Tilika points out, is he says that those
Ryan,
who...
Can I speak for those who have no voice on this podcast? After you read the
Yourself?
quote,
No,
after you read the quote, could you restate it and explain it for angst-ridden, uneducated people like myself?
Talented artists like yourself. You are a talented artist. So yes, I will. I'll explain it. So there's so many quotes here. Look on this list. Isn't this disgusting? So who has time for this? So he says those
It's
who
all vanity.
No longer fear God, fear everything in the world. And again, I said that's the road to saying, well, then the only thing I can put my trust in is the state at some point.
Well, there is no one who is not religious. That's one of the reasons,
Absolutely.
as I was quoting Dostoevsky, we see that it's not an issue of socialism, it's an issue of atheism, which in itself puts the state in the place of God.
Has to be.
Yeah, and I mean that's the reason why we see so many people melt down when they lose the election, when they see their idol that they propped up be not voted in. How could you not vote for their God? I mean, it's their God. And,
how could you desecrate my God?
Right? You're going into their temple, and you are desecrating it. So it's interesting that the fear of God will alleviate that stress, especially kind of practically with elections and stuff. When people we like don't win, it's like, yeah, God's still in control. He is sovereign. So that's a good quote.
No, and that's a great point. The election, it's a very contemporary example, and we're not making any partisan claims here beyond just the fanaticism. But Bo, you mentioned off the script about the book of Ecclesiastes, part of one of those Old Testament canon books.
Yeah, so Solomon, who was the author of Ecclesiastes, correct, Pastor?
Hey, who else are we going to go with, right?
Right. Yeah. So
yes. So why
he's presenting us with nihilism thousands of years ago, where everything is vanity. And I've been in a men's Bible study where we've been going through this for a couple months. It was brutal. But
You're saying having too many wives makes you nihilistic.
Yes. That's the collapse, the unfulfillment of pleasure. Anyway, so
Andrew Tate needs to take that one in, right?
Well, yeah, and you can go to my fan page if you really want to read some quotes by Andrew Tate, which I'm joking. So anyway, the thing is with Ecclesiastes is it presents a very dour, kind of a materialistic view of life. And so some people come away from it just really bummed out and thinking, what? I'm a Christian and I'm supposed to read this book of the Bible, and it just says everything is vanity. And then he breaks it down into every aspect of life where it's like life is cyclical. Everything is under the sun. It just keeps coming around.
Hebel, the vapor.
Yeah, and it's just horrible every day, in and out. But what you got to do is you got to learn the genre and what kind of book you're reading in the Bible, and paying close attention to what he says, because he's offering this as a person, a human under the sun, looking at life, in the way we do day to day in this cycle. And yet then it offers a view from over the horizon, from the heavens.
That we can't get, humanly speaking.
That's right. That's revelation.
That's
God reveals it.
yeah.
So you need the Holy Spirit to really convince you that what he's saying here is true from over the horizon. And where it really comes into a practical sort of aspect with nihilism is Nietzsche thought that the Christian world, the Christian culture that was collapsing and God is dead, he saw the asceticism and so forth in Christianity and thought it was life denying.
Mm-hmm. Like
this
fasting, sexual abstinence, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet here's what's said in Ecclesiastes. The preacher says, "Rejoice, O man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your own eyes, but know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment." So
Amen.
there are a couple passages where he says, enjoy your work, dig in.
But remember,
Well, he also says several times to eat, drink, and be merry, basically.
Yeah, he says, enjoy those things that life gives you. And then at the end, he says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. But it's not life denying. It gives you a very realistic view of life in this fallen world.
So with Nietzsche, you bringing up with the quote unquote death of God,
Yes.
which he didn't even believe in anyway. But he we use this today as like a prophetic mourning of society, with society not centered around God. But is that actually how Nietzsche framed it?
I mean, no, he saw it as obviously like the beginnings of like the emergence of this Superman, this life-affirming, self-justifying Ubermensch. He said he hasn't met the Ubermensch yet. I just finished thus spoke Zarathustra.
So he saw nihilism as arriving and going to be permeating Western culture, but he saw it in an optimistic way, did he not? Like he didn't see, like he thought that it would break down these institutions and norms to give way to something more. He was an optimist, which
For a
don't
certain group
think
of people, it was. Yeah. For the higher types, he calls them.
Yeah, well, for evolutionary, the evolution of humans in a materialistic world. Like,
Yep.
But we see the institutions today breaking down. People have less confidence, and you name the institution.
I would say that Nietzsche did not think that there was going to be a second round of nihilism, like a second wave that's more potent and maybe like a resistant bacteria that's resistant to any sort of antidote.
And the fact that the key thing that like you never see the Ubermensch, because the Nazis kind of thought they captured it well, and Thielke points out how just because there's vitality does not, it still leads to destruction if it doesn't have a spiritual base. So the Nazis were life affirming. The like Nietzsche describes the guy who's the devourer, the one who's able to destroy without a bad conscience. And that this kind of person would be able to justify stuff, but in reality, that doesn't actually work that way.
Sounds a little bit like the Antichrist.
Yeah, I mean, he has a book called The Antichrist.
Well, but Nietzsche, wasn't he critiquing nihilism and
Yes.
saying that there's going to be these nihilists who just think it's all going into the ground and that's it.
The Last Men.
Yeah, and he's saying no, this is to make way for something good.
But that's where Europe's at today.
Exactly.
I mean, that part is kind of correct. I mean,
Well, it is.
Yeah.
And the
He
theory
thought of a rosier future.
Yeah, well, the utilitarian approach to society.
What's that mean?
Well, the utilitarian approach is that everybody does what is best for the most good for society.
Yep.
So sometimes it requires sacrifice, but it's for what is most people to be able to be happy and pursue
Maximum amount of
Yeah.
good for maximum number of people.
the maximum number of people. And the whole basis behind this is that everybody gets educated, that they're taught and they're brought up. Because Mills, who is another
John Stuart Mill.
Yeah, John Stuart Mill is a philosopher. You know, when he's talking about this, he's obviously talking from a Christian perspective. So that if everybody, well, I wouldn't say obviously from a Christian perspective, but societally at that time,
Still borrowing a lot.
milieu.
still borrowing a lot.
Right.
Those
Yeah.
guys always are. They think they're not, but they are.
And it gave them this moral grounds in order to say this is how we educate. But what happens when the institution no longer, that now the institution is worshiping of nothingness, of atheism. So now what is best for everyone, the maximum amount of happiness for everyone is nothing, because ultimately in the end, the nihilistic approach to it is that because there is nothing, the utility has now been hijacked from that.
Well, it makes me think too. You were mentioning behind the set here just about how people transforming their bodies so that nothingness now means that your body can become inert matter to create whatever you want it to do.
Right. Well, there's his name is Alex Hamilton, and he wrote this book on transhumanism. And we're not talking. It's called this morphological liberty, which basically means you're free to change your body however you want, because
That's
matter
what transhumanism means.
as the transhuman, yeah, and it's not talking about bringing your body up to what I call a livable standard. To take that from livable standard. Well, that's when you're
Working-
when you're renting an apartment or a house.
Yeah.
The house has to be brought up to what they call
Livable
code
wage,
or
bro.
livable standard. So if you need glasses, you wear glasses. If you have a prosthetic because your leg was blown off in war, that's not morphological liberty. The morphological
If you need a facelift because
Yeah,
you're on,
well-
you're on. No, you're a televangelist.
There's a little bit of gray area. Yeah, just get some paper clips behind the head. So just pull the skin.
You can do that.
Yeah. You just on the back of the neck, and it takes off 10 years.
Sweet.
But it's going beyond because the true self and everybody is the liberty part about it is that everybody has a different happiness. What makes Ryan happy might not make Bo happy. What makes Bo happy might not make me happy. And so we're allowed to pursue this happiness, and we're allowed to do whatever we want to our bodies in order to pursue that happiness.
Whatever we can do, we should do.
Right, whatever we can do so that our idea of who we are, our own reflections, is outwardly presented. And that comes right in the vein of nihilism, because if you don't have a soul, if you're just neurons firing, a mind running, and
Yep, biology, chemistry, physics.
you got a plastic shell around a supercomputer inside that noggin of yours,
Skin suit.
skin suit. Then you go ahead and change that skin suit however you want. And they say it's the Hamilton talks about it being kind of the ultimate end to liberty, and that if you're truly want freedom, that you should be able to change your body however you want. But
And yet they're not happy. I mean, even the shooter recently in Minnesota
yeah,
was in despair in Frankenstein-esque form
he was. And
because he couldn't change himself.
he even admitted it. He said, I will know I'll never be a woman. What have I done?
And then with what he left behind, you see him figuratively. He shot at a Catholic school, but figuratively or in his mind, he's shooting at everyone:
Yeah.
Jews, Muslims, Christians,
At God.
God, everybody. So some people would see him as incoherent, and this makes no sense because he's angry and he's taking it out on all these disparate groups, some of which don't have any relationship. But if you look at him from a nihilistic standpoint, it kind of has some sort of, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things then I'm sure you're thinking, now we are bringing you into the pit of despair as our listeners. But one of the things that nihilism
my world.
that I got here again from the man I'm plagiarizing from, he talks about self-help. This is funny, ahead of his time. This is right in almost 80 years ago. He said self-help, quote, like we think therapy and certain kinds of therapy, allows us to not ask ultimate questions.
Oh, wow.
So he sees that, and he says, the peak of nihilism is not asking any questions at all. So there's whoever did translations, fine work, because these are very pithy, they're very memorable. But you're not asking questions at all. So that's the thing about us, like the questions of medicine, like why are we? What does it help? What means to be healthy? What does it mean to be a man or a woman? What does it mean to have a body that is a given and is not just like I said, particles and skin and stuff that can be worked. Those are the things that many people battle against. They don't even think of those things in places where they're supposed to be thinking, like university settings. So, yeah.
Well, self-reflection has been exchanged for ideological programming through most. I mean, you take a look at the kids doom scrolling. Just
The kids?
the kids. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Adults.
Mea culpa.
Yeah, but it's
At heart,
at heart.
your kid.
But the encouragement to free think has been greatly mitigated in our society. I mean, who has the attention span to think for long periods of time?
Well, one thing I would say too about that is, you're thinking, well, what's the solution to this? We're obviously assuming that we're not nihilists because we're presenting on this, I think, objectively as opponents of it. If you can oppose nothingness, so what is the way you do it? Well, I mean, a few things that Tilika points out that I think are good is that you can't do it by, quote, he says, escaping to a better world. So the idea that you can escape, he says that the dictator wants to keep the masses always in a good mood and wants them to always be unfocused.
Bread and circus?
Bread and circus. The scrolling is its own entertainment. So you can't just escape. You can't just say, have a good perspective on things. You can't even say, well, get married, have a family. This is something deeper than that. Like Ecclesiastes points out, that won't satisfy you. So you have to dig deep, and you have to, as a believer, pray.
Right.
That God would break this kind of dark spell of spiritual darkness.
So would you say, do you think this kind of culture, this sort of sea of nihilism that we're swimming in, that even Christians who have been believers for a long time need to sort of launder their souls from nihilistic thought?
Yeah. That's a great point, because you can have nihilistic thinking without being a full on.
You can do that?
Yeah, and I think that asking ultimate questions, relationally, we work with younger people. We work, obviously this podcast tries to reach out to people for that reason. We really think there's something important to say. That's why we're sharing this. I believe that's a good reason. So there's a certain degree of modeling, but yes, there are certain thoughts that you would want people to examine and be able to ask questions. You haven't become so hardened or numb.
Resigned.
Well, moving through this, faith is such a personal journey, and all of it has been indifferent for all of us. But we see that covenant with God, when you go in baptism and you die, which is the nothingness that they fear, that they have anxiety about.
Buried in baptism.
And like Luther said, when he would be attacked by the devil, because that's what he thought, he would repeat to himself, I have been baptized. That was his refrain.
I love that one. I'm a baptized Christian.
I have been baptized. And we're not talking about baptismal regeneration, or he just knows he can trace that to a point in time.
Right.
Where he decided to follow Jesus for us Baptists.
When he decided at that moment in time, he knew that he knew that he knew.
When
I
he
have
confessed.
been baptized.
Yeah. Well, it's through that
Proleptically.
through the death and resurrection of Christ where we see that's the answer. When you've already died and you've seen the end and you are with him, it's in that covenant that really brings us out.
I do think one thing you'll notice too, and again, this is not just my shtick, kind of is my shtick, but maybe not. But I mean, when you see across the cultures, you're going to see a lot of cultures that nihilism is destroying them, and the effects are going to be so bad, whether because it's Islam or because it's simply economic collapse. People are going to be thinking, this is where this leads. So that might be somewhat a wake-up call in the next 10 to 50 years.
Oh yeah, and this is not just an individual problem. We see this guilt-ridden nihilism spread across Europe right now.
No redemption, no idea of just giving yourself over, and
Yeah.
There's nothing to do with race, nothing to do with. I mean, it does have to do with religion, obviously, but if you don't have faith that your culture or your family has anything worth continuing,
Well,
someone will fill the vacuum.
Right. Well, we
Yes.
enter a contract with God in order for the individual to overcome that type of nihilism, but a culture entering into a contract with the government, because it's a suggestion that's been floated around a lot lately is Christian nationalism. As Western birth rates decline, we hit social collapse. We see what's going on in Europe, and basically, well, this could be a whole nother podcast.
It will be.
Nietzsche's understanding of the theologian, as he claims that they themselves are nihilists.
Right.
Which is interesting because these secular atheistic societies, their politicians are themselves the priestly class for these people, and they are proving to be very nihilistic.
Again, so Nietzsche, he saw nihilism coming. He's critiquing it. He seems to think it's a one-off, and then the society is gonna move forward. And he didn't seem to anticipate that it would happen again.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the new priestly class is the expert class,
So
the ruling class.
on a societal basis,
Trust the experts.
as our historian, has this been going on?
Oh, you mean living for 70
We are
years?
co-authors. Yeah.
The living historian.
Okay, I don't want to.
The one with the longest history, personal history.
I mean, has this pattern been emerging in our society?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and what I see just in talking today, I'm getting I had something flash before me, like to talk like a boomer.
Stay away from the light.
I had a flash, man. I flashed
migraine.
on this, which means maybe that could, there's always a disconnect between generations and so forth, and these sort of scuffles. But there's a big one, the boomer thing, and growing up and never identifying with the boomers, but knowing what was going on in boomerhood. Mm-hmm. So boomers were always about being authentic, getting earth shoes, eating whole wheat, so optimizing the natural world. And
So they'd be far right these days.
yes, and eating organic peanut butter and stuff. And so
I like that.
So or living in a yurt, going to a commune and stuff. And so then you talk about them thinking that they understand the thinking of an 18-year-old nihilist transhumanist who wants to change what they are intrinsically, I mean,
You want to program their desires.
yeah,
Reprogram
so like a
everything.
boomer was working with something that they saw as valuable, real, and
Redeemable to some extent.
yeah, making it beautifying what they are,
Like your artwork.
beautifying their work, beautifying their home, beautifying their family. So they had a sense of aesthetics and beauty that I don't think that boomers grasp. They're jumping in a protest with these trans people, or I don't think that they understand how different they view life.
And one good thing, though, I think that we do face is that, every generation thought that like theirs was the end, going back to 1862. So there's always these breakthroughs. And I mean, we did Jesus Revolution. Hey, we got to lean into that because evangelicals. I mean, there are a lot of people that were in that despair. The hundreds of thousands that were converted. Kyla, your
Right.
dad. Kyla's out of the frame here, but her dad and my dad. So there is that part, and I think that's the part where I'm just gonna maybe be able to summarize here too. Is the best quote I think from the whole book, Tilaka's book, Nihilism. He says that faith is a struggle or it is nothing. And he says we live in the name of the miracle or we vegetate. We live in the name of the miracle, or
I
we
want to
vegetate.
read this book.
I know,
Can
I
borrow
know.
it from
Am
you?
I going to get a cut from this, man? I need my own publishing site.
Well, it's out of print.
Well,
so
we know what
nobody's
they
gonna-
give authors at publishing sites, right? Some
Used
kinda-
book dealers are going to get a cut. I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. So we live in it. So that is the thing. The faith, it's not overcome by a new perspective, not overcome by escaping from the world, not overcome by just saying be better. Therapy, it is something God must do. And the point is, we believe in the kingdom of God, and we believe in the power of the resurrection. So God will do it and keep the chaos from nothingness. So, anyway, any closing thoughts that we can? I know we're.
Well, I'll go first and let you guys finish. It's interesting that our society presents either the nothingness, which nihilism we're talking about, or the extreme overachiever.
Oh, yeah.
The bodybuilder, the guy who makes $10 billion
Influencer,
with
yep.
600 women, whatever. The Tate versus, the trans shooter. And
Yeah, big gap.
yeah, we kind of
You're
have
right.
these dichotomies.
Yeah.
I mean, dichotomies too, either or. And, but then we see that the way to really escape that is actually through Christ.
Through Christ.
And I think that's one of the reasons why the Christian institution, whatever denomination, has been under attack by these people who oppose the way out. Maybe I'll do a talk on Plato's cave, because that's
Nice.
a great analogy.
Forms
Book
and
7.
shadows.
But yes, exactly. But so my closing thought is we don't have to go into nothingness, and we don't have to go into this materialistic, I have to perfect myself, but that we let Christ perfect us.
Yeah, I'll go next, and then you.
No, you can close it.
No, you close. 'cause-
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll
So-
say hit the like button.
So I would advocate doing what I did, which I had no plan. This was not in my. I walked after listening to Led Zeppelin one time. No, I don't know if this is how it happened. I just remember thinking this is it, and I walked out to the family room and picked up my mom's Bible that she wasn't reading, but that she grew up with, and just started reading the Bible. Even though I didn't like Christians, I didn't want to be one, but there was nothing left. So that came from out of the blue. That was the Lord reaching out to me. And
The miracle.
yeah, and so then I read the Bible and understood it. And I understood the perspective over the horizon, the one that comes from heaven via revelation. Sorry for all you hardcore, anyway.
Aw. We live in the miracle, or we vegetate. So we see that, and I know we'll have some personal stories we can share. So again, I hope you give comments to us. We appreciate comments. Try to reply to all of them, and we're probably going to cover another episode, possibly talking about the New Apostolic Reformation with Brody here talking about that. So I guess now we have to do it. So
Pastor, could you give an altar call?
how about we get an altar call right now? Yep, I have an AI thing that'll respond to you. No, I'm just kidding. Well, God bless you guys.
Oh, wait, before we go, where can we find you guys?
Oh,
You said you're
Facebook.
I'm on
Facebook
X
and
at Presbus, Presbus.
And my name, Ryan Rendell's on the X account.
And my art's on Instagram at Bo Salisbury 2018.
And what about you?
Well, you can find me at Bell Road Baptist, where Ryan preaches.
Okay.
Hallelujah.
All right.
Give a shout out. Come say hi. Come see us.
Bye.
Adios.